Let me be real with you for a second. I've spent a lot of time watching football practices, and I mean a lot. And most of them don't give you anything worth talking about. Guys running routes, coaches blowing whistles, the same drills cycling through over and over. You watch, you take notes, you try to find the thread. Most days there's no thread. But then there are days like today, and today was one of those rare ones where something actually happened that I couldn't shake. Not a touchdown, not a big arm throw, something quieter than that. And honestly, that's exactly what made it matter so much. Today was the final day of Cleveland's mandatory minicamp. 3 days, done. The off-season program is officially closed until training camp opens in 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence. No cameras on the field, no access for reporters, no structured evaluation you can measure anything against. Whatever conclusions were going to be drawn from this spring window, they're drawn. The information is in. And what I walked away with after sitting through every single rep of this final session is a perspective that's harder to dismiss than I expected it to be this early in the process. Shedeur Sanders is not just surviving this quarterback competition. He's separating himself from it, and he's doing it through the kind of football intelligence that you genuinely cannot fake at this level. Let me tell you exactly what I saw, because the moment itself is almost deceptively simple, and I think that's why it's so easy to miss if you're watching the wrong things. Sanders steps up to the line. The ball isn't even in his hands yet. The snap count hasn't started, and he's already working. His eyes are moving through the defense with this deliberate, measured scan that you typically only associate with quarterbacks who've been running the same system for 3, 4, maybe 5 years. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't frantic. It was the kind of processing that only happens when someone has done the film work, internalized the coverage structures, and actually trusts what their eyes are telling them in real time. He reads something. He signals a hot route to the left. He makes a protection adjustment to the right side. He essentially rebuilt the play at the line of scrimmage, calmly, efficiently, with the kind of fluency that made me genuinely forget, just for a beat, that I was watching a rookie in a non-contact spring practice. I had to rewind it, twice. I want you to understand why that specific moment is the single most important piece of footage to come out of this entire 3-day camp, because it's tempting to watch a quarterback waving his arms around before a snap and treat it as theater, something that looks authoritative without necessarily meaning anything. That would be a serious misread. When a quarterback makes live pre-snap adjustments, he is processing multiple layers of information simultaneously. He's telling a receiver to alter his route based on what the coverage alignment is communicating. He's shifting a protection call because he's identified where the pressure is likely coming from. He's giving the offensive line a read on the leverage they're going to need. And he's doing all of that in 3 to 4 seconds, in real time, while also managing his internal clock and holding his composure in a competitive practice environment. That is not a skill set you teach someone in a single offseason. It is constructed, slowly, through relentless film study, through hundreds of repetitions, through developing enough faith in your own diagnostic process to actually act on what you see without second-guessing yourself. Shedeur Sanders was doing all of it, and he made it look like something he's been doing his entire life. The context around this matters, and it connects directly to something I've been turning over in my mind ever since Todd Monken came aboard to run this offense. For years, and I'm talking about a frustrating stretch of years, the conversation around Cleveland's offensive system centered on how much it limited its quarterbacks. The structure under Kevin Stefanski was built around predetermined reads and scripted plays. You executed what was called. When the defense took that play away, you didn't always have a built-in mechanism to pivot, to rewrite, to react. Quarterbacks were functioning as operators inside a closed loop, rather than as live decision makers who could reshape things at the point of attack. That structural limitation had real consequences. Drives that stalled because a defense had cracked the code on the script, and nobody on the Cleveland side had the freedom to answer back in the moment. Monken is building something fundamentally different. His offense is designed to breathe, to flex, to let the quarterback operate as the actual brain of the unit rather than a sophisticated relay system for play calls. And watching Shedeur work inside that framework this week felt like watching someone who was specifically constructed for exactly this kind of environment. The pre-snap communication, the coverage processing, the live adjustments, all of it maps onto what Monken is building with an almost uncomfortable precision. The fit doesn't just look good, it looks intentional. The chemistry developing between Sanders and Denzel Boston is something I wasn't expecting to see this clearly this early, and I want to make sure it gets the attention it deserves because I think it's been underreported in the broader minicamp coverage. There's a fundamental difference between a quarterback and receiver who are running plays correctly and a quarterback and receiver who are actually in sync with each other, and the difference reveals itself in a very specific way. It shows up in the anticipation. When there's genuine trust between a passer and his target, the ball arrives before the route break is fully completed. The quarterback isn't throwing to where the receiver is standing. He's throwing to where the receiver is going to be in the next half second. based on how that specific player moves, how he sets up his release, how he accelerates, how he creates separation in different coverage situations. That anticipatory layer in the passing game takes time. It takes shared reps and real communication and a kind of mutual vocabulary that two players can only build by studying each other's tendencies over an extended period. The fact that we're already seeing flashes of it between Shedeur and Boston before a single preseason game has been played, that's not nothing. That's actually significant. It doesn't happen by accident. Dylan Sampson was also getting looks throughout today's session, and I want to give him credit for something that probably won't make anyone's highlight reel. Sampson is not generating buzz anywhere. He's not the guy people are searching for film on. But when I watch his route running in the context of full plays, when I track how he creates space in zone coverage, how he gives his quarterback a reliable window to throw into, how he manages contact at the stem of his routes, I start to understand exactly why a quarterback like Shedeur would gravitate toward him in specific situations. The short to intermediate passing game that dominated today's work is precisely the environment where Sampson becomes quietly valuable in ways that don't announce themselves. He's a chess piece, not a weapon. And the fact that Sanders is already identifying him as a go-to option in particular coverage structures this early in the process tells me something real about the offensive intelligence he's operating with. He's not just throwing to the open man. He's reading the game within the game, and he's doing it in May. I want to be straight with you about what today actually was, because I think the honest version of this conversation is more useful than the hype version. Today's practice was run game heavy, lots of handoffs, short rhythm throws, check downs, quick completions at the intermediate level. If you came in expecting a showcase, you probably walked away underwhelmed. I get it, but here's where I'm going to push back on the instinct to dismiss a low-key practice as a low-information one, because I think that instinct consistently causes people to undervalue one of the most revealing dimensions of quarterback evaluation, the check down game. The discipline and the willingness to take what the defense gives you, to not force something that isn't there, to be okay with the efficient play when the explosive play isn't available. That is the foundation of every offense that actually sustains itself over the course of a full season. Quarterbacks who can't master the mundane never get enough chances to show you the spectacular. The fact that Shedeur brought the same presence, the same processing intensity to a 3rd and 3 check down that he brings to a red zone shot play, that told me something real about who he is as a competitor. He doesn't have a switch that flips off when the moment isn't dramatic. That matters more than people give it credit for. On Deshaun Watson, and I want to be fair here because fairness is the only way to give this competition the serious treatment it deserves. Watson split first-team reps as Monken had indicated, and he operated with competence. He wasn't making the kind of decisions that would raise red flags. He looks like a veteran who has command of the system, who knows his progressions, who can execute within a design structure. I'm not here to tell you Watson looked bad, because that isn't what I observed. But here's the thing I can't rationalize away, and I've tried. There was a different quality of energy when Shedeur was on the field. It was observable. It was noted by multiple reporters who were physically present. One of the writers covering it specifically documented that Sanders had more visible impact on the practice than Watson did. That's not someone trying to start controversy. That's a professional watching football with honest eyes and reporting what they actually see. The gap between them in any individual session may not be enormous, but the fact that it's showing up consistently, the fact that multiple independent observers are landing in the same place, that's the part that becomes harder to set aside with each passing practice day. There's a psychological weight to this entire situation that I don't think gets examined enough. Think about everything Shedeur Sanders is carrying into every single rep. He's a first-round pick, which means the draft capital expectation is already sitting on his shoulders before he's thrown a single NFL pass. He carries his father's name, which means every comparison and every coded criticism about opportunity and access is somewhere in the air around him, even when nobody's saying it directly. He's competing against a quarterback who was once one of the highest paid players in the history of the sport, whose career has been fractured by injury and complicated by circumstances that generated a level of public sympathy and institutional loyalty that no rookie wants to be inserted into. The psychological terrain here is genuinely difficult, genuinely complicated. And yet, watching Sanders move through practice, watching the way he responds when a play breaks down and he has to improvise on the fly, watching how his teammates orient themselves toward him, none of that weight is visible in his body language. He's loose, he's sharp, he's operating with a confidence that doesn't feel manufactured for the cameras. It feels structural, built into how he moves through the environment. His father mentioned in comments that made some circulation that Shedeur was comfortable. More than comfortable, genuinely settled. and that in their evening conversations you could hear the steadiness in his voice. And then there's the detail that stuck with me more than anything else from today. The night before this final minicamp session, Shedeur was out on a practice field at 8 in the evening running footwork drills, alone. Nobody scheduled it, nobody required it, nobody was watching. He just did it, because that's the kind of competitive brain he has. That one detail tells me more about where this competition is heading than anything I watched under the lights. Footwork is the piece of quarterback evaluation that consistently gets underweighted in public conversation, and I want to spend real time on it because I've been watching it closely across all 3 days of this camp. It doesn't generate highlights, it doesn't show up in any stat line, but it is the mechanical infrastructure of everything a quarterback does, the literal foundation that every other skill is built on top of. The weight transfer through the throwing motion determines ball trajectory and accuracy under pressure. The pocket base determines how long a quarterback can maintain his downfield vision before the pocket forces a decision. The footwork through the drop determines timing with route combinations that are designed around specific rhythm intervals, a concept where a receiver's break and a quarterback's release have to align almost perfectly for the play to work. When the footwork degrades, the whole system starts breaking down in ways that are hard to isolate but easy to feel. Balls that are slightly off, throws that are almost there but not quite, timing that's a half beat late in a way that makes you wonder why. What I've been watching with Shedeur across these 3 days is a quarterback who has put targeted, specific work into this part of his game. His weight transfer is clean. His pocket movement is controlled rather than reactive. When he has to move off his spot, when the pocket shifts and he has to climb or reset, his eyes stay downfield, which is one of the hardest mechanical habits to develop in a young quarterback, because the natural instinct under pressure is always to look at what's threatening you rather than staying locked on where you need to go. He's overriding that instinct consistently, and you can measure the growth against where he was when the OTA period first opened. The 8 o'clock sessions are showing up in the mechanics. That's exactly what you want to see. The 6-week window that opens now is going to be quieter in a way that will tell its own story. No official practices, no cameras documenting anything for public consumption. Just private preparation and individual work and whatever conversations happen between players and coaches away from any audience. For Shedeur, based on everything we know about how his competitive mind is wired, those 6 weeks are going to look a lot like the night before the final minicamp session. Early mornings, late evenings, film, footwork, building the mental library of route concepts, defensive alignments, and hand signals that will let him walk into training camp sharper than when he left. There's no noise in that approach. There's just the work, done because it needs to be done, without anyone requiring it. When training camp opens and the pads come on, everything we've been evaluating in this controlled spring environment gets stress tested in ways that have no comparison. Blitzes that aren't signaled in advance, 2-minute situations with real defensive aggression, physical contact that rewires the mental calculus of every decision a quarterback makes, crowd noise, fatigue accumulating over back-to-back days, all of the discipline, all of the pre-snap processing, all of the chemistry with receivers, all of the footwork improvement. It has to hold up in conditions engineered to expose whatever isn't real. That's when the offseason narrative gets confirmed or complicated. I'm genuinely invested in watching that test because I believe Sanders walks into training camp ready to answer it. Not because the minicamp film is conclusive, it isn't, and anyone telling you otherwise is cutting corners. But because the pattern of who he is as a competitor points in a direction that doesn't typically produce soft performances when the pressure gets real. Here's where I actually land after watching everything from these 3 days. Shedeur Sanders won this minicamp. He won it by a margin that multiple independent observers on the ground noted without coordinating with each other. And he won it in the specific ways that actually predict long-term development rather than spring practice flash. The pre-snap adjustments, the developing chemistry with Boston and Sampson, the mechanical improvement in footwork and pocket movement, the composed leadership energy his teammates are already gravitating toward, and the voluntary 8 o'clock session with no one watching and nothing required. All of it assembled a picture across these 3 days that's hard to argue against if you're watching with honest eyes. Whether that carries through training camp, through the preseason, and into a week 1 starting role, I can't tell you that yet. Nobody can. The competition is real, and the stages ahead will bring pressure this spring couldn't replicate. But if you ask me what direction the evidence is pointing right now, it's pointing at Shedeur Sanders. Clearly enough that 6 weeks from now, when the pads finally come on, I think we'll look back at these 3 days as the moment the picture first started coming into focus.